Today, I'm going to provide smoking gun evidence that proves once and for all that there's an extraterrestrial presence here on Earth, and that the United States government has known about this for 75 years and has very successfully kept it a secret. Now, some of these documents that we're going to talk about here that's going to prove my points, they're out there in the public domain. They've been there for a long time. You've probably read these online, some of you have probably seen them mentioned in documentaries. Some of you have probably seen them mentioned in books. They're out there, and they're talked about a lot. But a lot of times they're not talked about enough, and that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about these documents a little bit more than and break them down, and we're going to get to the bottom of this. And you're going to see that these documents, particularly the first one, proves that the United States government has known that there's an extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and they've known about this since 1947. Now, of course, 1947, 75 years ago, that was the year that everyone started seeing UFOs. Now UFOs have been, spotted throughout the ages, during Roman times. Biblical times. There's been UFOs. There's been talk of UFOs. No one knew what they were or where they came from. No one ever talked back then about them being from outer space, possibly. But it wasn't until 1947, 2 years after World War II ended, that people really started noticing these things, particularly in the United States, but actually all over the place, all over the world, they started being spotted. But so in 1947, June of 1947 was when Kenneth Arnold was flying over Washington State, and he saw 9 discs flying in formation over a mountain range, and that story became international news. It was one of the biggest stories that year. These objects that he saw, they floated like discs skipping off water, according to Kenneth Arnold. Now, so for the next ever since that point, there's been reports of flying saucers and weird craft in the sky ever since. It's always been, ever since 1947 we've been talking about this, and there's still no answers from the officials who are supposed to provide us answers. They've been keeping secret about this. Now, of course, a lot of us believe, including me, that in early July of 1947, a flying saucer crashed in the desert outside of Roswell, New Mexico, and the United States government came in and basically at first admitted it, that they captured a flying saucer, but quickly changed that story and said, no, it was a weather balloon, nothing to see here. And then, of course, 30 years later, in the late 1970s, one of the top officials at Roswell, Jesse Marcel Sr., came out and told the world about it. Said, yeah, no, this was not a weather balloon. This was something that we've never seen before. And the materials that he saw from this crashed object were unearthly. That story, of course, stayed buried for 30 years plus. Until Jesse Marcel, the top intelligence official now, mind you, the top intelligence official in Roswell in 1947 at the only atomic bomb site in the entire planet, right? And he's the top intelligence guy, and he's telling us 30 years later that no, this was not a weather balloon. This was something that we never saw before, okay?
You couldn't even bend it. You couldn't dead it. Even with a sledgehammer would bounce off it. So I knew that I had never seen anything like that before. And as of now, I don't know what it was. It was not anything from this earth that I'm quite sure of. Because being an intelligence officer, I was familiar with just about all materials used in aircraft and in our air travel. This is nothing like that. It could not be. It could not have been.
Now, of course, that was covered up and forgotten about. But so let's stay back in 1947. Now, there was still concerns and reports and by many people, by people in the Army Air Forces, into the 1950s when it became the Air Force. The Army Air Force, just the United States Air Force. There were lots of reports by pilots, not just civilians, but by pilots. They were seeing these things all the time. But In 1947, there was a gigantic wave, and it went on for a long time. And nobody had any answers, Actually, there were answers, but they weren't provided. I mean, once that Roswell saucer crashed, that was the answer. Okay, yeah, we got the answer should have been, well, there's beings from outer space and operating these machines, and we don't know how they got there. We don't know what their intentions are. That was the answer, but that answer was kept secret from the public. It was only talked about in the highest echelons of the government at that point. And even people in high positions did not have were not brought into the know on this. Which brings me to the first person we're going to talk about, Brigadier General George Shulgin. Now, at some point during the summer of 1947, during this gigantic UFO wave, now this Brigadier General, right, he's the commanding general at the time of the Army Air Forces, right, and later on he would become the commanding general of the United States Air Force, right. Now, he sent a letter to General Nathan Twining, right, of the Air Material Command. And now General Twining, before we even get a little bit further on this, General Twining, as some of you may know, his name appeared as one of the members of Majestic 12, right, later on. Operation Majestic 12, which was a document that was leaked in the 1980s that showed that on September 24th, 1947, President Harry Truman enacted this, formed this new group, Majestic 12, to basically study this UFO extraterrestrial problem. This group, apparently, according to these documents, which I've talked about in recent podcasts. If you want to see more about that, I'll leave a link to that. There was a couple different podcasts where I talk about these Majestic 12 documents. So Twining would have known about Roswell. In fact, we actually know that Twining made an unscheduled flight to Roswell during all this stuff going on in July during the Roswell incident. And there's no information on why he went there. He wasn't supposed to go there, but he went there. But all we know is that he went there. Flight logs confirm that. And that's it. There was no other information on why he went to Roswell in July of 1947. But I think we all have a good idea why he went there. But anyhow, Shulgin sent a letter to Twining at some point, during this big, gigantic flying saucer wave during 1947, during the summer. And he wanted to know, okay, what do you guys know about these flying saucers? Do you have any answers? So on September 23rd, the day before, apparently, the formation of this Majestic 12 group, the day before, there was a letter that Twining sent to Shulgin. And that's the first document that we're going to talk about. And I just want to point out that this document that we're going to talk about, it was classified as secret, not top secret or above top secret. So Twining couldn't talk about in this document. A lot of people will say, oh, well, if Twining was on Majestic 12, well, he should have known more than he's saying here, right? Yeah, of course he would have known, but Shulgin, he was not on Majestic 12, and he wouldn't have a need to know about anything that Majestic 12 was investigating. So that's why this document's was not classified top secret or anything above top secret. It was classified secret. So Shulgin, because Shulgin had no need to know. But there was other information still that was provided in this document. And again, unlike the Majestic 12 documents, which a lot of debunkers out there will try to tell you, well, they're fake. Okay, even if you don't believe in the Majestic 12 documents, forget about the Majestic 12 documents for this. This document, right, was something. This is a real document, no question about it, declassified. And actually declassified sometime in the 1960s, right? So let's go through exhibit number 1. Letter from General Twining to General Shulgin. Subject: Air Material Command opinion concerning flying discs to the Commanding General, Army Air Forces. Attention, Brigadier General George Shulgin. As requested by AC/AS2, there is presented below the considered opinion of this command concerning the so-called flying discs. This opinion is based on interrogation report data furnished by AC/AS2 and preliminary studies by personnel of T2 and Aircraft Laboratory, Engineering Division T3. This opinion was arrived at in a conference between personnel from the Air Institute of Technology Intelligence T2 Office, Chief of Engineering Division, and the Aircraft Power Plant and Propeller Laboratories of Engineering Division T-3. 2. It is the opinion that the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Okay, let's just stop there for a minute. Let me just say that again, and sit back in awe and listen to this. The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Okay, that's a top general in the United States government telling this Brigadier General Shulgin that this is real. It's real. These objects are real. Okay? Is that sinking in a little bit for you? For people out there that still don't want to believe? Or people on the fence? If you're on the fence. Okay, let's say it again. A, the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Okay, there you go. That means it's real. B, there are objects probably approximating the shape of a disc of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as man-made aircraft. Okay, he's telling Shulgin, the objects are disc-shaped. Okay, disc-shaped. Flying saucers. Okay. C, there is a possibility that some of the incidents may be caused by natural phenomena such as meteors. Okay, now he's saying that there's only a possibility, and that there's only a possibility, mind you, that some, and only some, if in this possibility, there's a possibility that some, okay, only some of these incidents may be caused by natural phenomena such as meteors. To me, that implies that these objects are there, but there's possibly some, only possibly some might be something else, but otherwise, no, this is going on. That's what he's saying there. D, the reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and action which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. Okay, now let's go through. This sentence here it's written in a way, well, people just glance over and glide over it, but actually this is saying a lot. There's a lot being stated here. They're basically saying here that these things are, when back then in 1947, when anybody in the Air Force is flying around and they see these things flying, right? They know that that these things are obviously, more advanced than anything they're flying in. I mean, because they just can't catch up to them, basically, and they're climbing to levels where their planes can't climb. So obviously, let's go through it again. The reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and action, which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft or radar. So again, that part right there is saying that these things are evading them. When we get close to them, they take off at speeds that they can't keep up with, So that makes them realize, well, it says here, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. That's saying, okay, well, obviously there's intelligence behind these things. We get close to them, they take off. We can't get close to them. Okay, continuing. E, the apparent common description of the objects is as follows. 1, metallic or light reflecting surface. 2, absence of trail except in a few instances when the object apparently was operating under high performance conditions. 3, circular or elliptical in shape, flat on bottom and domed on top. 4. Several reports of well-kept formation flights varying from 3 to 9 objects. 5. Normally no associated sound except in 3 instances a substantial rumbling roar was noted. 6. Level flight speeds normally above 300 knots are estimated. Okay, so they're basically telling you, okay, these things are metal, they're reflecting light, they most of the time don't have any sort of trail. There's an absence of trail. They're round, circular, elliptical, flat on the top, just like flying saucers, like people are describing. So there you go. Okay, then let's continue. F. It is possible with the United States, within the present United States knowledge, provided extensive detailed development is undertaken, to construct a piloted aircraft which has the general description of the object in subparagraph E above, which would be capable of an approximate range of 7,000 miles at subsonic speeds. Well, as far as anybody knows, we haven't done that yet. No, we haven't. No. I think that was pipe dreaming at that point. He's saying it's only possible. He's not saying that it's possible, maybe. That's basically how it sounds to me. But anyway, continuing. G. Any developments in this country along the lines indicated would be extremely expensive, time-consuming, and at the considerable expense of current projects, and therefore, if directed, should be set up independently of existing projects. Okay, now continuing here. H. Due consideration must be given the following. Now, the next 3 points that he puts here, these are lies. And Twining knew they were lies. And we know now after 75 years that they are lies. Okay. 1. This is what due consideration must be given the following. 1. The possibility that these objects are of domestic origin, the product of some high security project not known to AC/AS2 or this command. Now that's blatantly false on its face. Okay. For one thing, it was 19. Let's go through and why this is completely, absolutely fake. That's a phony statement, and he had to know this. That there's no way that those objects were of domestic origin. Okay, but time has proven that they are not. Okay, it's 75 years later, and guess what? The Pentagon in recent months here told the Congress the same nonsense. They're still telling that same lie. There's always a possibility it may be of domestic origin. Now let's think about that for a minute. Let's think about domestic origin. How could these things have been of domestic origin back in 1947? World War II was just over. It just had finished, right? So you're going to tell me, and during a time, it was only 2 years later, right? At this time, you're going to try to tell me that during World War II and the couple years after, that there was some secret group of engineers and scientists working unbeknownst to anyone else, right, on these things. And our government couldn't figure out never knew that was going on, because it would have taken time, right? It would have taken time to come up with this, to develop something like this, right? And besides that, I mean, you're looking at World War II, there was all this rationing and all this, from food, the gas, to everything else. All the concentration at that time was winning the war in Europe and Asia. That was it. So there's no way these things are of domestic design. I mean, what kind of government, after 75 years, and they're still saying the same thing? That these things are of domestic design? Are you kidding me? How ridiculous is that to say that? Especially now. I mean, the statement at that time might have sounded believable, okay? But we know now that he's lying at that point, right? Because, right, there's no way. There's 75 years later. They're saying the same things. So they're still lying with the same lie 75 years later, that somebody here domestically is building these things. And these are the same objects they're talking about today. They're saying, oh yeah, well, these things that the Navy seen, the Air Force is seeing, it could be of domestic design. Somebody domestically we don't know about is doing this. Now that's nonsense. That's impossible. It's preposterous. There's just no way. It's been going on since 1947. You're going to tell me that somebody domestically in 1947 came up with these objects. Well, while World War II was raging about in Europe and Japan, right? World War II is raging on. And meanwhile, there's some secret group of engineers right under the noses of the United States military, the strongest military in the world at this time, right? Especially by 1947. And that they accomplished this feat and somehow are just flying rings around our aircraft ever since. It's impossible. You can't believe that. That's nonsense. Okay, then the second lie, number 2. He says, the lack of physical evidence in the shape of crash-recovered exhibits which would undeniably prove the existence of these objects. Of course this is a lie. Twining had to know about what crashed at Roswell. But again, because this document that he's sending out to Shulgin, and Shulgin, is only, classified as secret, not top secret or above, right? And Shulgin obviously has no need to know, but they have questions, and he gets some answers, right? But he can't answer this, so he has to tell a lie. He has to say, well, we don't have any evidence of any crash recovered exhibits. That's because Shulgin or nobody else who's not part of MJ12 are supposed to know about this. So even though now MJ12 wasn't formed until the next day, right? That's when it was official. But all these guys that became part of MJ12 knew and were under orders that some people do not have a need to know. Okay, so that's a lie there. And then finally, 3. The possibility that some foreign nation has a form of propulsion, possibly nuclear, which is outside of our domestic knowledge. Okay, they're saying the same thing today. That was 75 years ago. Now, if it was okay, now let's use our common sense here. Okay, if Russia or China back in 1947, which by the way were not nearly close to us technologically at that time, not close. Somewhat close, but not that close. Especially Russia was just getting close to launching its first nuclear, detonating its first nuclear bomb. Okay, but there was no other nation on Earth that was stronger and more technologically advanced than the United States in 1947. It's just a known fact. Okay, nothing else here, nobody else here. So this same lie that they were telling in 1947, they told just recently this past summer to Congress again. They're telling the same lie for 75 years. And let's use our common sense. If that statement is true, okay, if those objects that people have been seeing since 1947 were manufactured in Russia or China or some other country, right? Then they would have attacked us with them already. They would have taken over the world already. And over the last 75 years? What, are you kidding me? They would have got us, and we wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. Anybody who is to master this technology first could take over the whole planet. So that's a lie. Those are the lie parts of this document. But again, I don't want to get too upset with this document, because at the same time they admitted that the phenomenon is real and not visionary or fictitious, right? They know about these things. They exist, right? And obviously, they're something that no human is doing. No human could do. No human has this technology. If some humans did, they would have already used it. It would have became public after 75 years. There's no way it could have been maintained a secret for this long. That's because it's not people who are doing it. It's just not people as we know people, right? It's beings from other places that aren't from here. This is smoking gun evidence, folks. This proves that the United States government has been lying, has been keeping this a secret for 75 years. This document, right? This document, which is it's verified, right? There's no mystery on it. Wasn't leaked by it wasn't leaked secretly, and there's no debate over its veracity. It's accepted. But when you look at this document, you realize that this is real. And when you think about the implications of this document, the words in this document, you realize that there's an extraterrestrial presence on Earth, and the government has been keeping this a secret all these years. Okay, now let's finish up this with this document. Okay, number 3. It is recommended that A, Headquarters, Army Air Forces, issue a directive assigning a priority, security classification, and code name for a detailed study of this matter to include the preparation of complete sets of all available and pertinent data, which will then be made available to the Army, Navy, Atomic Energy Commission, JRDB, the Air Force Scientific Advisory Group, NACA, and the RAND and NEPA projects for comments and recommendations, with a preliminary report to be forwarded within 15 days of receipt of the data and a detailed report thereafter every 30 days as the investigation develops. A complete interchange of data should be effected. 4. Awaiting a specific directive, Air Materiel Command will continue the investigation within its current resources in order to more closely define the nature of the phenomenon. Detailed essential elements of information will be formulated immediately for transmittal through channels. Signed, Nathan F. Twining, Lieutenant General, United States of America. So there you go. That document is real. Now, I will leave links in the bottom of the page, in the description, excuse me, for you to check out these documents with your own eyeballs and come to your own conclusions. But I don't think there is any other conclusion with regard to this document, other than it proves that there's been a cover-up for 75 years, right? Despite what anybody says, right? You could read that for yourself. This was written by a top general in the United States Army. Even if you don't believe the Majestic 12 stuff, which I do, but even if you don't believe it, that document there proves that the government has known about this and that they've covered it up for 75 years. Okay, moving on to Exhibit B. Now, the next document we're going to talk about is the Smith Memo. It's a document that was written by Wilbert B. Smith in November of 1950. Now, Wilbert B. Smith was a radio engineer with Canada's Department of Transport. And in the early 1950s, he headed Canada's investigation into UFOs called Project Magnet. Now, before Project Magnet, not long before Project Magnet, there was a memo that Mr. Smith had written. It was a top secret memo, and it did not become declassified until sometime during the 1970s. But the memo, we're going to read it right now. It's dated November 21st, 1950. Memorandum to the Controller of Telecommunications. For the past several years, we have been engaged in the study of various aspects of radio wave propagation. The vagaries of this phenomenon have led us into the fields of aurora, oceanic radiation, atmospheric radioactivity, and geomagnetism. In the case of geomagnetics, our investigations have contributed little to our knowledge of radio wave propagation as yet, but nevertheless have indicated several avenues of investigation which may well be explored with profit. For example, we are on the track of a means whereby the potential energy of the Earth's magnetic field may be abstracted and used. On the basis of theoretical considerations, a small and very crude experimental unit was constructed approximately a year ago and tested in our standards laboratory. The tests were essentially successful in that sufficient energy was abstracted from the Earth's field to operate a voltmeter, approximately 50 milliwatts. Although this unit was far from being self-sustaining, it nevertheless demonstrated the soundness of the basic principles in a qualitative manner and provided useful data for the design of a better unit. The design has now been completed for a unit which should be self-sustaining and in addition provide a small surplus of power. Such a unit, in addition to functioning as a pilot power plant, should be large enough to permit the study of the various reaction forces which are expected to develop. We believe that we are on the track of something which may well prove to be the introduction of new technology. The existence of a different technology is borne out by the investigations which are being carried on at the present time in relation to flying saucers. While in Washington attending the NARS conference, 2 books were released, one titled Behind the Flying Saucers by Frank Scully, and the other Flying Saucers Are Real by Donald Kehoe. Both books dealt mostly with sightings of unidentified objects, and both books claimed that flying objects were of extraterrestrial origin and might well be spaceships from another planet. Scully claimed that the preliminary studies of one saucer that fell into the hands of the United States government indicated that they operated on some hitherto unknown magnetic principles. It appeared to me that our own work in geomagnetics might well be the linkage between our technology and the technology by which the saucers are designed and operated. If it is assumed that our geomagnetic investigations are in the right direction, the theory of operation of the saucers becomes quite straightforward, with all observed features explained qualitatively and quantitatively. I made discreet inquiries through the Canadian Embassy staff in Washington, who were able to obtain for me the following information. A. The matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating even higher than the A-bomb. B. Flying saucers exist. C. Their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush. D. The entire matter is considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. I was further informed that the United States authorities are investigating along quite a number of the lines which might possibly be related to the saucers, such as mental phenomena, and I gather that they are not doing too well, since they indicated that if Canada is doing anything at all in geomagnetics, they would welcome a discussion with suitably accredited Canadians. While I am not yet in a position to say that we have solved even the first problems in geomagnetic energy release, I feel that the correlation between our basic theory and the available information on saucers checks too closely to be mere coincidence. It is my honest opinion that we are on the right track and are fairly close to at least some of the answers. Mr. Wright, Defense Research Board Liaison Officer at the Canadian Embassy in Washington, was extremely anxious for me to get in touch with Dr. Solant, Chairman of the Defense Research Board, to discuss with him future investigations along the lines of geomagnetic energy release. I do not feel that we have as yet sufficient data to place before Defense Research Board which would enable a program to be initiated within that organization, but I do feel that further research is necessary, and I would prefer to see it done within the framework of our own organization with, of course, full cooperation and exchange of information with other interested bodies. I discussed this matter fully with Dr. Solant, Chairman of Defense Research Board, on November 20th, and placed before him as much information as I have been able to gather to date. Dr. Solant agreed that work on geomagnetic energy should go forward as rapidly as possible and offered full cooperation of his board in providing laboratory facilities, acquisition of necessary items of equipment, and specialized personnel for incidental work in the project. I indicated to Dr. Solant that we would prefer to keep the project with the Department of Transport for the time being until we have obtained sufficient information to permit a complete assessment of the value of our work. It is therefore recommended that a project be set up within the framework of this section to study this problem, and that the work be carried on a part-time basis until such time as sufficient tangible results can be seen to warrant more definitive action. Costs of the program in its initial stages are expected to be less than a few $100s and can be carried by our radio standards lab appropriation. Attached hereto is a draft of terms of reference for such a project, which, if authorized, will enable us to proceed with this research work within our own organization. Signed, W.B. Smith, Senior Radio Engineer. But again, let's go back to the highlight of this letter. Now, of course, the letter itself, I mean, you're talking, this is some scientist, he's talking very seriously about geomagnetics and trying to advance in that field. But meanwhile, he brings up that he was making discrete inquiries and in Washington, and he found out these different things, that the flying saucers do exist, right? They don't know how they're operating. There was a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, right, who happens to be, by the way, one of the names on the MJ-12 list from 1947. It's the most classified subject in the United States, rating even higher than the A-bomb. Well, why wouldn't it be? I mean, yes, of course it would be. And it was also considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. Of course it would be. But see, there you go. Now this is another one. Now this is somebody that made inquiries into this matter, a Canadian, and this document was kept secret for many years into the late 1970s, and it shows that yes. This guy received information from certain people after making some discreet inquiries, and this is the information he got. And the information shows that there's no question that they know all about it. They know that there's flying saucers. They know that they're real, and they're studying them. They don't know how they operate. They don't know what the modus operandi is, right? So they did look. This is verification, further verification, And this is, again, an official document. This ain't something that that everyone's claiming on whether no one's throwing out concerns that we don't know if this is real or not. No, everybody agrees it's real. It's real. Okay, it's now declassified. It was a top secret Canadian document that is now declassified, and it states clearly: flying saucers B on this memo. B, flying saucers exist. Period. There you go. Okay. And then the other, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher even than the H-bomb. That's pretty clear, right? All of this is very clear. But now this Wilbert Smith is going to come into play again here, because right before we get into our third and final document, which will put the icing on the cake here. Now, in the early 1980s, there was a Canadian researcher. His name was Arthur Bray. And he was, and by this time, Wilbert Smith, he had passed on. And he was going through some of the papers of the late Wilbert Smith. And he came upon some handwritten notes relating to a conversation that Smith had in about UFOs in 1950, September of 1950, with Robert Sarbacher. This Robert Sarbacher was a brilliant scientist who had connections with the Pentagon, right? And that was very interesting information. So that means that, and the interesting thing was, at this time in 1982, he was still alive. Robert Sarbacher was still alive. Right, so this Stanton Friedman and UFO researchers, Stanton Friedman and William Steinman, they decided we're going to look into this. Well, Steinem, sent Sarbacher, this brilliant scientist who happened to still be alive, a letter in the early 1980s, and all of this leads to Exhibit C. Now, this is a letter that was written by Robert Sarbacher, okay? This guy was a scientist. He was a brilliant scientist. And a UFO researcher, William Steinman, had sent him a letter asking him if he was aware of the things that Wilbert Smith had alleged in these notes. So, and on November 20, a letter dated November 29th, 1983, Sarbacher responded. And here's what it says. Dear Mr. Steinman, I am sorry I have taken so long in answering your letters. However, I have moved my office and I have had to make a number of extended trips. To answer your last question in your letter of October 14th, 1983, there is no particular reason I feel I shouldn't or couldn't answer any or all of your questions. I am delighted to answer all of them to the best of my ability. You listed some of your questions in your letter of September 12th. I will attempt to answer them as you had listed them. 1. Relating to my own experience regarding recovered flying saucers, I had no association with any of the people involved in the recovery and have no knowledge regarding the dates of the recoveries. If I had, I would send it to you. 2. Regarding verification that persons you list were involved, I can only say this. John von Neumann was definitely involved. Dr. Vannevar Bush was definitely involved. And I think Dr. Robert Oppenheimer also. My association with the Research and Development Board under Dr. Compton, during the Eisenhower administration, was rather limited, so that although I had been invited to participate in several discussions associated with the reported recoveries, I could not personally attend the meetings. I am sure that they would have asked Dr. Von Braun, and the others that you listed were probably asked and may or may not have attended. This is all I know for sure. 3. I did receive some official reports when I was in my office at the Pentagon, but all of these were left there, as at that time we were never supposed to take them out of the office. 4. I do not recall receiving any photographs such as you request, so I am not in a position to answer. 5. I have to make the same reply as on number 4. I recall the interview with Dr. Brenner of the Canadian Embassy. I think the answers I gave him were the ones you listed. Naturally, I was more familiar with the subject matter under discussion at that time. Actually, I would have been able to give more specific answers had I attended the meetings concerning the subject. You must understand that I took this assignment as a private contribution. We were called $1-a-year men. My first responsibility was the maintenance of my own business activity, so that my participation was limited. About the only thing I remember at this time is that certain materials reported to have come from flying saucer crashes were extremely light and very tough. I am sure our laboratories analyzed them very carefully. There were reports that instruments or people operating these machines were also of very light weight, sufficient to withstand the tremendous deceleration and acceleration associated with their machinery. I remember in talking with some of the people at the office that I got the impression these aliens were constructed like certain insects we have observed on Earth, wherein, because of the low mass, the inertial forces involved in operation of these instruments would be quite low. I still do not know why the high order of classification has been given and why the denial of the existence of these devices. I am sorry it has taken me so long to reply, but I suggest you get in touch with the others who may be directly involved in this program. Sincerely yours, Dr. Robert Sarbacher. So there you go, folks. Additional confirmation. Additional smoking gun proof that there is an extraterrestrial presence here and that the government has known about it for a long time. And as one more little cherry on top, in the book UFOs and the National Security State, the Cover-Up Exposed, 1973 to 1991, this is by Richard M. Dolan. This book, this is basically volume 2 of UFOs and the National Security State. On page 278, Saul Barker actually talked to Steinman again. Okay, this is a direct paragraph from UFOs and the National Security State, Volume 2, by Richard M. Dolan, and I will leave a link in the description if you're interested in this book. I actually highly recommend this book as well as UFOs and the National Security State, Volume 1 by Richard Dolan, if you're interested in the subject of UFOs and how the government has handled this issue throughout the years. Anyway, here's a direct paragraph on page 278 of his book. It says, later, Saul Barker told Steinman that a certain Dr. Eric Walker was involved. Walker was another prominent scientist and former president of Penn State University. Saul Barker told Steinman that Walker, for sure, attended UFO meetings at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the early 1950s. Walker, too, was still alive. Steinman found Walker and spoke to him, receiving the startlingly candid reply, yes, I attended meetings concerning that subject matter. Walker said he had known of MJ-12 since 1947, but told Steinman he was, quote, delving into an area that you can do absolutely nothing about, end quote, and advised him to, quote, leave it alone, end quote. So there you go. There was corroboration, and there was another scientist telling this reporter, this investigator, to just leave it alone. You know, he admitted it, but he wasn't going to talk about it. But we have the documents. There you go. I mean, you don't need anything else. You know, the whole thing is, you know, all of us today at this moment in time, we're all worried about oh, what's Lou Elizondo going to say, when he comes out with his book? Or, does Jeremy Corbell have some more video to show us, or is the Black Vault, gonna reveal some more, documents, get some more documents from the government via Freedom of Information Act request. Well, that's all good. That's great stuff. But, we already know. It's already been revealed. This has already been revealed, and we ignore it. This has been ignored. I mean, particularly the letter, the initial letter there by Twining, by General Twining. General Nathan Twining wrote that letter, and, it's real. That this is, he said it's not visionary or fictitious. They're real. They're more advanced than what we got because we can't catch up to them, and are obviously intelligently controlled because when we get near them, they take off. They fly away. And this was, he's saying this was after 3 months of this. This thing all started. Okay, he wrote that letter. It's September 23rd. 1947. It was only going on. This whole UFO flying saucer phenomenon only was going on for 3 months by that point. But yet he had all this information. They were seeing so much of it. Pilots and military personnel and plus civilian witnesses. They were seeing so much of it. They knew. They had photographic evidence. There was the picture taken by William D. Rhodes, a guy in Phoenix, Arizona, of one of these craft that resembled pretty much the same thing that Kenneth Arnold had seen. So there were pictures. They already had things in 1947. And not only that, Twining knew. There's no question. He had to know. Twining knew about Roswell. I mean, he was on the MJ-12, whether you want to believe that or not. I mean, he had to know about what happened at Roswell. I mean, we have Jesse Marcel Sr. telling us starting from 1978 until his death in the mid-'80s, saying, hey, this was no weather balloon, folks. I was the top intelligence official at Roswell Army Air Force Base of the 509th Bomb Group. And I tell you, this was nothing I've ever seen before. It was unearthly. But again, we have documented evidence. None of that even matters. Even if you don't believe in Roswell or Majestic 12, you have to believe in this. These are all official documents, for sure. No question. Unquestionably. And basically, Twining is saying in 1947 the same thing that the Pentagon officials were telling Congress earlier this year. So basically, all these years have gone by, and they're doing the same thing. They're telling the same lies. The same lies. In the Twining memo, for instance, they're saying that there's, he suggests that it could be domestic, right? We went over this before. There's no way it was domestic. There's no way it could have been domestically of domestic origin, these objects. They're still saying that today. So you're going to tell me that in 1947, somebody in the United States, right, in their garage, or their secret or some secret base somewhere, right, that had no connections with the government or anything else, developed flying saucers that could outrun, that could fly rings around our aircraft, and even we weren't even using jet fighters hardly yet. It wasn't until 1948 yes, of course, jet fighters were under development, but it really wasn't until like the later 40s till our flyers start flying them with regularity. So you're going to tell me that somebody in the United States had developed these secretly without the government knowing about it? Come on. And of course, I also believe that Twining's mention of the lack of physical evidence. Okay, of course he had a lie. Again, this was a secret memo. Like again, take note of this. Take note of that. The lack of physical evidence. If you believe in Roswell, which I do, and a lot of people actually do, you would realize that Twining definitely knew about the Roswell crash. So he had a lie. But that's okay. That's okay, because even though he's lying here on some of it, we know he's telling the truth about the rest of it. And then, of course, the possibility that some foreign nation has a form of propulsion, possibly nuclear, which is outside of our domestic knowledge. Now, come on. 1947, you think Russia or China had anything close to what we had? Come on. And again, this is the same lie. Again, they're still telling. They're still telling Congress today. It's extraterrestrial, folks. It's the biggest secret of all time. It's the best kept secret of all time. And you know what? The aliens themselves, obviously, these extraterrestrials themselves, they want this secret too. It's all a big secret. The government's keeping a secret, and the aliens want to be secretive. Basically, what's going on behind the scenes here, what I believe is happening, and why this has been kept secret for 75 years, very successfully, is because, the governments, there's a race among governments, a secret race to basically develop these things, figure out how they work, figure out how you could build them and make them work just the way our visitors make them work. And there's a lot of other little things besides flying at incredible speeds and making hard right angle turns in the sky, right? And flying at speed so fast that it looks like they actually disappear. There's things that are there's other things that these beings are capable of doing, and that's like basically shutting down nuclear weapons facilities, as was demonstrated by flying saucers in the 1960s, and there was quite a few of them, but the well-known was the 1967 Malmstrom incident, right, where flying saucer shows up and basically shuts down all the missiles, and they wouldn't be able to launch them if they wanted to. So it's in addition to having the technology to fly at tremendous speeds and silently with no sound whatsoever. Another aspect of this would be to try to reverse engineer the technology that's capable of shutting down nuclear weapon systems. Now, if the United States was able to do that, we'd be able to shut down from all these other countries, North Korea, Russia, any enemy country that has these things, we could shut them down and basically take control. We could take control of the whole world, or maybe Russia. If they figure it out before we do, let me tell you, they would take control of the whole world if they got this. They would shut down our missile systems, and they would take over the world if they had that kind of technology. But again, that's what I think is going on, and that's why they're keeping it secret. It's about military reasons. That's all it's ever been. But yes, this is absolute proof. This is a smoking gun proof. It's always been right there. We've talked about it for years. It's smoking gun proof. It's undeniable. These letters are official. It's not like they were faked or anything. There's no question. There's nothing to question there. These documents were real. These memos, everything about them was real. And they're talking about this stuff, and they're telling you that it's real. Or actually, they're telling the people they're meant to be sent to that it's real. They weren't actually made for except for Sarbacher's letter, right? The first two, the Twining letter and also the Wilbur Smith memo, they were written to people in government and were meant to be secret. Now the other letter was meant to be public, but Sarbacher apparently didn't care. He just came right out with what he knew. And he actually said there are beings, and they're built like insects from what he's heard. So they know all about it's real. That's the smoking gun proof. Well, why doesn't the mainstream media ever talk about this? Why didn't the mainstream media talk about how the Pentagon continues to lie, continues to bring in people and lie to Congress? They just lied to Congress a couple months ago, and they're telling the same story they were telling 75 years ago. Oh, it could be domestic. It could be foreign enemies. No, it's not. It could. There's no. Okay, let's look at it this way. Back then, there's no way it was anybody domestically. There's no way we weren't that advanced technologically at that point. There's no way we could have made something like that. There's absolutely no chance of it, right? And the same goes for our foreign enemies at the time. Russia, there was no way. They weren't anywhere near where we were, right? They were working on the atomic bomb. That's what they were worried about at the time. They weren't building flying saucers. And again, if they did, then we would have known about it by now. 75 years have gone by. So no, it's not. It's no, and they're telling the same thing. It's like they pulled out the old playbook. Oh, we'll just go into Congress and we'll just tell them the same thing we told them 75 years ago. The frickin' United States public, they're a bunch of frickin' idiots anyway. You know, the only people will call us out probably for sure is the people that know better. But you know, everyone else will just think they're nuts. No, but you know, using your head, using common sense, you know that this is real. You know that they're trying to pull the blinders over your eyes. So yes, this is smoking gun evidence, folks. Smoking gun evidence, and there you go. You know, think about it. Read the documents yourselves. Read some of these books I keep talking about. UFOs in the National Security State, Volumes 1 and 2. Top Secret Magic, Operation Majestic 12, and the United States government's UFO cover-up. You know, if you want to read a really good book, you know, about Roswell, read Roswell, The Ultimate Cold Case Closed. You know, I'll leave links for these books in the description. Check them out. You know, educate yourself, because you're not going to get an education. You're not going to get enough of an education on this subject just by simply watching documentaries on TV or, you know, watching the occasional 60 Minutes interview with some Navy pilot. I mean, again, you're going to walk away unsatisfied because you're just not going to have enough information. These books that I tell you about, you get enough information from them, right? And not only that, but we also, in addition to those books, there is evidence. There's absolute evidence. I like to see the debunkers come up with what's the debunkers' answers to these things, you know, to the letters. You know, what do they say about Nathan Twining, you know, and his 1947 letter to Brigadier General Shulgin? What do they have to say? There's nothing they can say that would make any sense. So yeah, it's over. It's a done deal already. This is a done deal. I mean, because they just told the same lie. They told the same. This is the bottom line here. The biggest point of all of this is this: they just told the same lie this year that they told in 1947. They're telling the same. I mean, it's not like they're saying, "Oh, there's no such thing as UFOs." No, they're admitting that there's things out there, but they're trying to tell you, "Oh, it could be domestic. It could be foreign." That's a lie now. We know that. It has to be a lie. It's always been a lie. It's been a lie from the beginning. Time has borne that out. Anyway, thanks for listening.